Hey everybody, welcome back to Therapists Unmasked. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Sam. Join us as we dive into the world of trauma therapy with our fellow trauma therapist, Michelle.
We hope you enjoyed the episode, and let's roll the intro. Hello, beautiful. Welcome to the podcast. We're really excited to have you on. Hi. So introduce yourself. Tell us your name. Tell us where you're from.
Want to know it all.
You do. Yeah, what you do for work and what your views are on mental health.
Yeah, well, my name is Michelle Bown. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Pennsylvania and in Maryland. And right now, as a therapist at a private practice, I'm actually part of a therapist co-op, which has been a really cool experience to be a part of. And my views on mental health, oh my goodness, how much time do you guys have?
A lot. Yeah.
I feel like mental health to me, when I try to think about how it relates to what I do for work, it's something that I think every person is going to struggle with at some point in their lifetime. So it's not, it doesn't discriminate. It loves people from all different socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds and cultures. Mental health kind of touches us all. So I feel like being a therapist is my favorite way to try to help people navigate that.
That's amazing.
That. How long have you been practicing for?
I've been licensed for 6 years, but I started in the mental health world in 2014. That was when I started. I worked as a job coach for individuals that are priority population. So predominantly schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, personality disorders, and I was helping them get jobs. And then I went back to graduate school because I loved it so much. And the rest is history.
Okay. Now you said that you were licensed in both Pennsylvania and Maryland. How did that come to be?
Great question. Well, I'm from Maryland. I lived there, went to graduate school there, and then my husband actually got a job in Pittsburgh, right outside of Pittsburgh. So when we moved up here, I wanted to keep working. But at the time, I was actually working in a hospital in Frederick, and I decided to go back into doing therapy. So I got licensed in PA, and I just kept my Maryland license active. So I was like, I worked so hard to get it.
So I did my schooling in Jersey, but I live in New York.
Oh, okay.
And my hometown borders Connecticut. So my current goal is I wanted to, if I would have stayed in Jersey, then my goal was like, do the Jersey hours, because Jersey is known to have the most hours. I believe it's 4,000 hours. Then yeah.
4,000. No. 4,500 to be exact.
Okay, 4,500. New York and Connecticut have 3,500 hours. And so my goal was like, okay, I'll finish the Jersey hours and then I will get the licensure in New York and Connecticut. But I ended up moving back to New York, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's crazy. I thought Maryland was high and there's only 3,000 hours.
Yeah,
500.
Right. Around us, it's like New York and everywhere else. They probably have the less hours compared to Jersey, which is the worst.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, in Maryland, for social workers, I don't know about counselors, but you have to take your initial exam to be an LMSW, which is what you're licensed as while you're working on getting your clinical licensure. And then once you're done with your hours, then you take a second exam for your clinical license.
Oof.
No, we only have one exam.
No, yeah, we only have one exam and that's it.
I am so happy about that one exam.
Yeah. So now we as therapists, I feel like a lot of us have been through a lot of things that have led us to be in the field that we're in, right? So what was that thing for you? Like, what motivated you to become a therapist?
Yeah, I don't know that it was any one thing in particular. It was kind of a series of different events that happened, but I will definitely say the summer before my sophomore year of my undergraduate program, I went to therapy. Was having a very difficult time at that point in my life, and my therapist was amazing. And I was really, dumbfounded at how much help she was able to lend me, especially in such a short amount of time, because I really only saw her for those few months throughout the summer. I did go back to her kind of through the years when I needed to sort of have a little brush up on mental health. But I think that was a huge impact on my deciding to become a therapist was that I thought, my goodness, like these kinds of tools, people need to know them because a lot of people struggle. And if I can be some kind of resource to them in the way that this woman was a resource to me, it definitely was part of a large part of the reason why I decided to become a therapist. I mean, I think that had I not sought out therapy at that time, I think my life would have been a very different trajectory. I'm sure I would have made it through, but I think things were, pretty rough in terms of my anxiety at that time. So I don't know that I would have made it through my sophomore year of school. I might have ended up dropping out had I not had those supports. I might have not gone to graduate school had I not had access to a therapist. So all of those things combined, I think it's really, really important. It was impactful for me.
Honestly, Michelle, I'm genuinely curious about this question. Like, why do you think people look down upon social workers? Like when you tell them I'm a social worker and they're like, oh, like why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that society maybe sometimes doesn't fully understand what social workers do. I that when I've told people I'm a social worker, sometimes I get that scared look, like, are you going to take my kids away? Like there's that stereotype of, oh, the social worker who is, working for, not
CPR.
that child protective service workers do this at all in any capacity, but it's the stereotype. People associate social workers in that way. Sometimes I've definitely gotten that before. I know some people have always commented, oh, it's such hard work for no money, which is also true, not true. There you can make a decent living working as a social worker. I think that it's just society's kind of maybe misconception of what social workers do. They don't realize that you can be a social worker who does a lot of different things. There's clinical social work, macro social work, healthcare social workers.
So let me ask you, with that being said, did you always see yourself working in a clinical setting, or was there a different demographic that you wanted to work with originally?
I knew I would probably land in the clinical setting. The only other setting that I've worked in and that I did thoroughly enjoy was the medical field. I worked as an emergency room social worker for some time, and that was it was kind of a mixture of clinical work and case management work, which I did enjoy, but I really love the clinical piece of meeting with people, especially one-on-one and having those conversations. That's my favorite part of being a social worker.
So let me ask you, you work in a clinical setting. What demographic do you work with now?
I specialize in trauma, but I see lots of different, varieties of mental illnesses. I work with kids and adults. So I have the youngest children I see are age 4, and I think my oldest clients right now are around 60s, maybe early 70s. So variety of lifespan, which I really enjoy.
Some people are genuinely curious as to how that came to be, how we as people come into these fields and are able to actually handle everything that is thrown at us. So with that being said, what do you do for your self-care when you're not at work in order to help you get away from the environment of everything that you hear?
Wow, that's a great question. I I mean, it's certainly something that I've struggled with over the years. As much as I would love to say that what happens at work stays at work, like it's a book that I close and I put on the shelf and then I drive home and I don't think about it. There are those stories, those situations that really stick with you. Um, so I mean, in terms of being outside of work, I do try really hard to not check email. I'm not taking client calls on off hours. I'm trying to stay focused on myself and my family when I'm off, as much as I possibly can. I also find that I kind of go into I have like work mode Michelle, and then I have everyday Michelle. Whereas when I'm in work mode, I can kind of look at the client's situation, what they're facing or what's happened to them, and look at it very, you know, in a way that is not necessarily deeply affecting me because I'm focused on how do I help them, and I can't help them if I'm being, deeply emotionally affected by it. But if those same things were happening, in my personal life, I'd be a wreck. So, but kind of having that work mode has been helpful. I don't know if I explained that very well, but
I think you did a great job. What do
okay.
you do to prevent countertransference?
Yeah, I'm a big writer. I like to journal. So if I'm finding that those sorts of feelings are coming up for me in session, it's something I will kind of carve out some time to reflect on and ask myself, why are those feelings coming up? Like, what's the root of it? As well as remind myself that just because I'm relating to something that a client is telling me does not mean that my client feels the same way that I might feel in that situation. Like, I need to stay as objective as possible when looking at what they're dealing with.
Sometimes when, for example, I've had a client that like talks about losing a mom, and I've lost my mom. So I've told them, I don't tell them like, oh my God, I lost my mom too, and it made me feel so depressed and like blah blah blah, But I will tell them like I know what that feels like to lose a parent. So I'll say something along those lines. And then they're like, oh, like thank God you felt like you experienced this too, because now I feel like I'm not alone. So sometimes I do that. Because I feel like I like to show my client, me personally, I like to show my clients that like I'm human too, and I've gone through similar things too. Um, I'm wondering if you do something like that with your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly, I don't self-disclose a ton, but I think in certain moments it can be really validating for the client to hear, oh, it's not me. This isn't, especially when something, I work in trauma. So when something's happened to them, I will oftentimes, I might not even relate it back to me, but I'll say, a lot of women, I'm thinking of all of the women I've worked with who are assault survivors. Women, 1 in 4 women go through something like this, or talking in a way that makes them realize that this has nothing to do with them. What's happened to them is not their fault. It's not because of them. That's one way that I've certainly related that back.
I'm very curious, since you work with kids and you have kids, so hearing what your clients have been through, does it ever worry you about your own children? And if so, like what do you do to handle that?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Because I've talked to my other therapist friends who I've known since before we had kids, and now they have kids, and it's wild. I mean, before I had children, it's not that the things that I saw that were going on with kids didn't upset me, but it's certainly changed a lot once I had children. So yeah, if things happen, I specialize in trauma. When I have kiddos come in and they've had really terrible, awful things happen to them, it's hard not to think about, oh my gosh, what would I do if this was my own little? I, of course, when those little thoughts pop into my brain, I'm like, all right, it's just a thought. I try to flick it away and get it out of here, but they definitely come up. It's hard.
So I don't have kids as of right now, but I do have younger cousins. And the oldest one is 11, 10, 8. Like they're little.
Hmm.
And I always, whenever I come home from like a bad day of work or something, they're always there to like brighten my day and just make me feel happy. And then sometimes I just look at them and I'm just like, dang, like I just saw a kid your age in my office. It's a feeling that obviously like you don't want anything to ever happen to the people that you love. But then on the other hand, you're thinking the reality of it is that there are some people that this happens to, and that's why they're there to see you. And so I'm kind of brought back to that way of thinking, like, oh my goodness, it's a thought. Like, get it out of your head. Nothing has happened, but it's a thought. And I have some family members who work in a hospital, and my uncle being one of them, where one time he was working, he thought he saw a young woman my age come into the emergency room, and he said that like the emergency room just goes really quickly. Like you're handed a chart, you're immediately working on the client, on the patient. And so all of a sudden he went from looking at the chart and then saw the girl and immediately had to do like a double take because the girl looked exactly like me. She was my
Oh my
age.
gosh.
She had my same hair color. And so for a split second, he was like frozen and terrified to even go to her, thinking it was me. And this girl came in with like a drug overdose. I don't do any of that, but like just a thought that, oh my goodness, that's my niece. He said he was frozen. So when he came home, he saw me and he just gave me like the biggest hug. And he was like, I am so happy right now. Like, you do not understand. Do not let go of me right now,
Yeah.
please. I just need a hug. So that being the first experience I ever had, well, it being my uncle, but now thinking that I'm in the field, this can happen to my cousins. I understand that feeling that my uncle had when thinking it was me in that gurney.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to always, I oftentimes I'll ask myself, if it was my kid in the chair, what would I want
Hmm.
their therapist to do? Because sometimes several times I've had kids tell me something that they've not yet told their parents. Of course, we navigate that as we need
Hmm.
to, but I always kind of try to remind myself, like, right now, I'm their safe adult. I need to I've got to stay focused on being what I would want my kids' therapist to be for them. And
Hmm.
that's how I've tried to stay focused on this isn't my kid. But if it was, what would I want their therapist to
Exactly,
provide and
yeah.
do for them? Certainly, on like the really difficult days, I think similar to your uncle, I just want to come home. I'm like driving home and I'm like, I just want to go hug my kids. Like, I just need to get to them and hug them and know that they are safe.
Know that they're okay, know that they're safe. My child
Yeah.
is a dog. So
That
I
counts too.
yeah, I'll
My
come
cats
home.
too.
Yeah. I'll come home to my dog and I'll just be like, he's actually really, really good at sensing when there's something wrong. So if I come home, he's the first one that is at the door waiting to greet me. And if I come and lay in my bed, he comes, he lays next to me and he'll let me like hug him, squeeze him, and he won't move. He knows,
Oh,
like, okay, I'm staying here.
that's awesome.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a little cat conversation. How many cats do you have?
Oh, I have two cats.
Oh.
They're Dee and
What
Dennis.
what
They're
colors
named
are they?
after black, and then the other one is like gray. I don't. There's a maybe she's a tabby. I don't calico. I don't remember the exact name, but she's gray and white and like orange, kind of.
Okay, I see. And how old are they? How long have you had them for?
We got them in 2019, no, 2018. So they are 6 years old. Yeah, 6 years old.
Wow.
Will be
No.
7, I think. No, they'll be 6. They're
My
gonna turn
mom's
6 soon.
allergic to cats. I can't have a cat.
I had a dog who was with me. He was very similar to your dog in that he would kind of know. Like I had him all throughout graduate school and through my 20s. Excuse me. And he was very attuned to emotions. He was a sweetheart.
I feel like animals, they just know. They know when
Yeah,
something's
they
wrong. They
do.
know when you need them and they're there for you.
For
Hmm.
sure. I have a cat. I have a dark gray cat. His name is Cyrus. He's a gray cat with green eyes. I love it.
Oh,
But
wow.
he just knows when I'm either if like I'm sick or if I'm just really sad, he'll come to me, plop his whole body. You know how that is. Plop his whole body
Yeah.
on me. And he'll just start purring on me and just, being all cute and stuff. So cats are really good as like emotional pets. They
They
really,
really are.
really are.
My
But
cats, both of them. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, 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 go
You
ahead.
go. Both of my cats knew I was pregnant even early on. They would be like on my belly, hanging out, and then throughout the whole entire pregnancy, they both just would not leave me alone.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
very cute.
Cute. How do they react to the babies?
They wanted nothing to do with the babies. Once they showed up, they were like, no, thank you. You're loud.
Speaking of kids, though, how do you do it? Like we're working in a field where like, we have to separate our emotions and focus on our clients, right? And then you have your own family where you're dealing with your kids and I'm sure they're running around and you're doing 50 million things all at once. How are you doing it? How are you staying sane throughout all that?
I'm highly caffeinated at all times. Also really tired. Um, No, it's definitely been the busiest season of my life. My kids are 3 and 1, so they can't really take care of themselves. Like my 1 year old, he's wild. He's always getting into stuff. But I think I mean, my husband is wonderful. Like we're definitely a true partnership in terms of the kind of tag team things and get it done that way. I think if it wasn't for having that support and then the support of our families too, both sets of grandparents are great. It'd be a lot harder. And daycare. Our kids go to daycare 3 days a week, which is helpful because as you guys probably know, when you're doing therapy with someone, it's like you're on. I've got to be in front of the camera if I'm home, if I'm working from home virtually. I can't have my kids running around. So
Yeah.
Tell me about your anxiety growing up and if it affects you now as a therapist, if at all.
yeah, I would say when growing up, I was always an anxious kid. Definitely kind of scared to try new things and stuff like that. But my anxiety didn't really fully come out and rear its ugly head until adulthood. I left for school, and then throughout my freshman year, I think that my mental health just kind of it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when I came home for the summer, it was like, oh geez, things are not well.
Mhm.
Um, so I reached out to a therapist and started seeing them. She had diagnosed me actually with OCD at that time. So I was having, without the compulsion component, which back then I didn't know that compulsions can also kind of be what we do in our mind to try to get rid of those anxious thoughts that are, you know, my understanding of OCD was, oh, people who wash their hands, like a lot of
Yep.
people think,
Mhm.
which is not the truth. So I went through CBT and exposure therapy with her that summer, and it worked like a charm. It was great. But my anxiety, it was like the OCD went down, but the generalized anxiety was kind of just like she wasn't going anywhere. She was there to stay. So struggled with that, throughout the rest of my undergraduate. And at some point, I started to have panic attacks. And when you have panic attacks, there's like this little fun thing that our brains do, that some people's brains do, not everyone's, but we're so freaked out from the panic, usually the physical symptoms of the panic, that we're terrified of having another panic attack. And then the fear of having another panic attack makes you have another panic attack. It is a messed up
Messed up
cycle.
cycle.
Yeah. And we call that panic disorder. So then I go to a new therapist and she's like, I'm sorry, sister, you have panic disorder. And that was when I started medication, which was like truly life changing for me. The first medication I was prescribed ended up being the one that worked, which was very, very lucky. And I continued on with therapy and just got better and better. But when I initially was diagnosed with panic disorder, I was in my first semester of graduate school and I dropped out. I left because I knew at that point my mental health had deteriorated to the point where I was like, I can't keep going to school. So I left and I took, I want to say maybe 2 years off before I ended up going back and finishing out my program. But it was definitely a rough time. So now all of that happened 10, 11 years ago. And medication and therapy has worked wonders for me. I couldn't tell you the last time I had a panic attack. It was probably at least maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, which is great. I still struggle with anxiety. I don't think that's ever going to go
Mm.
fully away, but at this point, I'm kind of like, it's part of my personality. I almost kind of like it. It's like, my little quirk.
What would you say to people who don't want to use medication because they're scared that they will get addicted?
Oh, yes. I was that girl for sure. I did not want to take medication. Was adamant. Did not want to do it. And I went into my primary care doctor's office and she's like, asked me, I was just telling my mom this story recently. She said, "How are you doing?" Because I probably looked unwell. And I said, "Not great." And I started to cry. And she was like, "It's time. Like, you need to try something." And she had prescribed me Prozac, which is SSRI, not, I don't want to say not addictive in the traditional sense. Of course, if you're on it for elongated periods, you have to be weaned off. But, and then she gave me, uh, benzodiazepine as a PRN, which is highly addictive. I think that that's a medication to tread lightly with. Of course, I'm not a doctor, but I think if you're afraid of getting addicted to medications, definitely talk to psychiatrists, talk to a doctor about it. They can walk you through the risks and the advantages of taking each individual medication. Um, I've, you know, not had any kind of issues where I've become addicted to anything. But of course, if I did want to, I still take an SSRI. So if I wanted to come off of it, I would have to, talk to my doctor and be off of it.
There are some clients that have come up to me and either they've asked me, like, I don't know about my medication. Like, I feel like I'm scared of getting addicted. And then there are other people who have come up to me and said, I don't want to be that person that has to take medication because they can't handle it. They feel less than because they have to be prescribed medication in order to regulate their emotions. So, what would you say to help those people?
Yeah, I typically explain it to people in this way that, if you had diabetes and you went to a doctor, they would say, okay, you have to take insulin. If you go to a doctor and you say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I've tried X, Y, and Z, chances are your brain's probably not producing enough serotonin, and this medication is going to help you, or help your body correct that issue. There's no shame in that. We all kind of have different health issues. I think we have a tendency to look at mental health medication as being a crutch or, why can't you just, figure it out, pull yourself up from your bootstraps? But in reality, if the brain's not making enough serotonin, my brain's not making enough serotonin. And so I usually explain it to people in that way. We would never judge someone for going to the doctor with strep throat and getting an antibiotic. So why do we judge people who have struggled with depression or anxiety or bipolar or schizophrenia for getting the medication that truly can be life-saving?
No, yeah, that's a great way to put it. I try to always, when it comes to medication, tread lightly because
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the person and, the reason that they're there to see you. Not everybody needs it. A lot of the time you need to learn how to manage everything that's going on. And if at some point you realize you can't do that, and you want to find an alternative method, then sure, something you can try, but it depends. It's case by case, definitely, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people, like, I never want them to feel pressured into medication. It's really for them. The other thing I've explained to people is that medication, it can be hard to use the coping skills if you are in that state of stuck feeling like you're crazy and feeling like you can't shut the thoughts off. And sometimes medication can be a little booster just to help you get to a place where you can start to use the coping skills. And then when you get better with those, then you can kind of come off the medication. So sometimes it
Hmm.
can be like a little booster to get you going, and it doesn't have to be long term.
Definitely.
Growing up with anxiety, right? did your family ever, did they question it? Did they not understand it? Was it something that you had to constantly like keep having conversations with them about? What was that like?
I think they noticed that I was anxious, but I think that they were just like, oh, that's just how she is. Like, I don't think that they necessarily, and that got in the way of me. Like, I was very great in school. I had tons of friends. I did extracurriculars. Like, on the surface, I don't think it really raised a red flag for them. But internally, it definitely, there were moments where I was like, oh, this doing this new thing or trying to branch out of my comfort zone, it caused me, it felt like a lot more discomfort than it was causing my peers. So it kind of made me feel like, oh, am I weird or strange? But my parents were always just kind of like, no, you're doing great. Keep on trucking.
Personally, what are some things that help you with your anxiety?
Oh, that's a good question. um, Making sure I'm taking care of just like the basics, honestly. I mean, especially with being very busy. I know it sounds cliche, but like, am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating enough food? Am I drinking enough water? Am I so making sure that all of my basic needs are met, which at times I know that that sounds silly, but there are seasons of life where we're not getting enough sleep, or drinking enough water, eating enough food, or doing those things. So that's always my number one. I'm doing that first and foremost. I think um, meditation. I'm big into meditating. Um, that's definitely like guided meditation because as someone with anxiety, I can't shut my brain up. So I need to have somebody in my ear telling me what to do to be able to meditate. But um, what else do I like to do? If I, like I said before, I'm a big writer. I journal quite a bit. Um, which is, I think, helpful for me to kind of put things into perspective because I'll oftentimes find myself being really anxious about things that truthfully have no, like I have no business thinking about. Like, why are you worried about this? So writing is a good way for me to kind of bring myself down to level of, all right, why are we worrying about things that really it doesn't matter. I'm not going to care about it 5 years from now.
It's definitely not stupid. Having to remember to drink water and eat. I think as therapists, we have a very busy and hectic schedule, seeing clients that are back to back, and we need to be reminded that we need to take a break and actually put something in our bodies. I have forgotten to eat and or drink anything. So now I carry around a giant water bottle and I
Oh,
put it right next to right now I have this, but I put it next to my desk right in front of me. That way I know, oh, water is right there. But even then, sometimes I'll just be like typing away on my computer and I'll forget all about the water. And then by the time I see the clock, it's 7 o'clock and I've been there since 9. And that water jug has barely moved anything.
oh yeah, I definitely can relate to that. This is very therapist specific, but I oftentimes think about that hierarchy of needs from, I'm sure you guys remember from graduate
Yep.
school. It's got like the different, and like the bottom one is physiological. Sometimes I'll run through that. I'll just look at it and be like, how am I doing here? Each of the levels, like what's going on? Like, especially if I had an off week, I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten breakfast all week. Like, that's not good. And then I didn't call my mom, and I haven't seen my husband in a few hours. I have to
It's
kind of
a
like do a check-in with myself of like, you're not taking care of yourself, Michelle.
And that's a good way to check in. I honestly even forgot about that, to be
I love
honest
that
with
thing.
you.
That's my Roman Empire. I think about it all the time.
When I was living in New Jersey, I lived there for 2 years. We had so much work to do. It was a constantly writing an essay, constantly doing stuff. If it wasn't for the fact my mom is very big on calling every single day, I don't think I would have talked to her in a while. My dad was more on the I'll let you call me because I know you're busy. And then I think I went like 3 months without seeing my siblings.
Have you ever experienced burnout before?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I would say the biggest burnout I dealt with was in I guess like 2020. So I had my firstborn, my daughter, in April of 2020. Went on maternity leave, came back from maternity leave, everything was telehealth. And at the time, I was seeing like, I don't know, 30, sometimes 40 sessions a week, just all through Zoom, in my basement, with a small child. It was rough. Like it was a tough time. Plus you're kind of dealing with just the collective trauma that I think everyone was dealing with during that time. So I did what any smart person would do, and I quit my job as a therapist and went to go work in an emergency room during a pandemic. So I thought that would help my burnout, which it actually in some ways did. Like it did. It was a good switch up because I kind of got a break from doing clinical work. I think I needed that break for a little bit and to do something different and more the healthcare field, working in an emergency room. But I would say, yeah, I've certainly that's the biggest bout of burnout that I've gone through, but it kind of waxes and wanes. It comes and goes.
I've experienced burnout too, especially with the job that I have now. I actually probably experienced burnout on Thursday that this past week. Because for me, the way my job goes is like sessions are 30 minutes long. And I'm seeing like 16 people a day. Um,
Oh wow.
and
So
I
it's like
am
go, go,
it's
go.
like fast, fast, fast. And I'm actually not used to that. I just started this job in December because I'm used to the private practice stuff of like an hour session and just taking my
Hmm.
time and having my own schedule and all that stuff. So this is like really like go, 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 fast paced, fast paced.
Are you in a clinic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I don't really have a say in like who I'm able to say. And I'm learning though. So like I see it as a great learning experience for me because again, I'm still fairly new. I've been in the mental health field in general since 2020 and I officially licensed in 2022.
Oh
Um
wow.
yeah, so I'm pretty fairly new and I'm still learning. Me personally, I like to see people who struggle with like depression, stress, anxiety, like life transitions, grief. Those are my forte, right? But here, obviously, I don't have a say in who who I kind of can't see again, right? So it's a lot. It's a lot. And when I get home, I'm like, nobody talks to me. So, do you have those days when you come home and you're just like, obviously you can't tell your kids that, right? Like, don't talk to
Tell
me.
our kids.
But but like, do you have those days where you just need some time to yourself? Does your husband work with I'm sure your husband works with you in that sense to like
Hmm.
take the kids when you need that alone time, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. My husband's great about doing that. Oddly enough, with my kids, I think it's kind of refreshing when I come home after those days. I just like to sit and play with them, like just sit and do nothing but play, because there's something really cathartic about especially if I've done a lot of play therapy that day. Coming home and just like not having to think, like, all right, I'm just playing with Barbies right now. We're building magnet tiles. Like I'm not, it's like I can kind of turn my brain off, but also enjoy their company. But I also definitely need time alone. Um, and my husband knows that. He knows that there are days when it's just like I can't talk. I don't have it in me. I don't have it give
Yeah.
anymore, which those days are few and far between, but I can definitely sympathize with working in an outpatient mental health clinic. That was where I was in 2020 when I went through a big burnout. I was
Oh,
working in a clinic and it was very similar. Like I didn't have a say in my clients, my hours. It was just like, you've got
yeah.
to meet your numbers and, see as many
Yeah.
people as you can.
Can we talk really quickly about productivity?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I work under a grant. So I worked with victims of crimes, any crime. And the list is long. So I basically see everybody. A lot of people in general don't show up. There's always so many no calls, no shows. And even
Mhm.
though we talk, we talk about how to communicate with them. We explain to them, let us know if you're going to cancel all that. They don't do it. They just don't come. I don't really understand how knowing all this information, we are still given a very high productivity number as if we are supposed to compel our clients to come to session, even though we try our very best to communicate, call, text, email, carrier pigeon, like we try all forms, but we're still expected to have this high productivity number. I don't know your guys' productivity, um, if it's a little different than mine, but as far as I'm known for productivity, like it's majorly based on attendance.
Yeah, that's how it was when I worked in a clinic. Every private practice I've worked for, the owners have been really chill about like, whatever numbers you make is whatever numbers you make. But when I worked at the clinic, it was very much like you need to meet your numbers. You don't have a choice. And before COVID, it wasn't that much of an issue because I met with kids and adults in the school setting and at their homes. So they couldn't really no call, no show me because I was like knocking on their door. But then everything went to telehealth during COVID. And I had a lot of that because I also worked with a population that didn't necessarily have access to a computer or a smartphone or internet access. It was really difficult to stay connected with them, which was A, tragic because I worked with a lot of at-risk youth and adults as well. But B, it definitely hurts when, if you have management breathing down your neck, like, well, why have you only seen this many clients this week? Well, it's not that I wasn't trying. Promise you I was. It's just sometimes people are not available.
Well, that's what I believe leads to the overturn rate of constantly new therapists coming in and out because the productivity levels are just unimaginable. Like you can't do it.
I mean, I don't know much about your job position, but they're probably designed for you to not meet them if I had to take a stab at it. Because I think a lot of, unfortunately, mental health roles, that's just the design of them. And then I don't know if you guys have ever worked in fee for service before,
I have not.
where,
No.
if you have a no call or no show or even a late cancel or what have you, you don't get paid. You don't
Yep.
have that, if there's no client in your chair, then that can kind of also add, I think, to burnout because therapists, or really anyone in the mental health field can feel that additional pressure too.
You don't do fee for pay, then you do salary, and even then it depends on the location. Some people just don't make any money. Like you spend so
Yeah,
much money to gain this degree, and yet the payout that this field gives you is going to keep you in debt for the rest of your life.
yeah. I love the work. I just hate, all of the stuff that makes it stressful. If I could just go and, do therapy with people and not have to think about quotas and numbers and salaries and all of that, that would be great,
I
unfortunately.
wish there was somebody would have invented this a pen or something like in Harry Potter where they're talking, the journalist, she's talking and the pen is writing by itself. Like everything. I wish
Oh,
that's how our
yeah.
notes would have gone. That it could either be like in a pen, like you're talking and then the pen like is writing everything out internally and then you can print out those notes.
That would be amazing.
That'd be great. Then I feel like life would be so much better for us.
I am the worst about notes. Notes I'm okay with. I'll make my peace with notes, but treatment plans,
The
oh,
worst.
I hate treatment plans. Yeah.
I think you can relate since you've worked in a clinic before. It's definitely the notes overwhelming, the treatment plans, having to do all of that at the same time, super overwhelming. And especially like you, with me, right? Like we have to do all of that in front of the client. So like that's also
Hmm.
so you did that too, right? So like
Well, they
that
told
was
me I had to, but like my brain doesn't work that way. I
my
couldn't do
brain is
it.
not like right now, like it does not work that way. So I'm behind on
Yeah.
notes right now because like I'm so used. So I've worked in both types of settings where the private practice and schools, like where I just gave the client my undivided attention. I'll be like, all right, like the notes were a future me problem. But
Yes.
but here, like you have to get the notes done within 24 hours. You have to get the treatment plans done within 24 hours. And then there's just it's so much. I don't know how I give you props for being able to do that too, because it's definitely a lot.
It really is. I mean, I remember when I worked in the clinic, that's what they told me because they booked, your appointments, they did 40-minute sessions and they booked every 45 minutes. So it was like you have 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, get your water, like
Yep.
whatever. It's certainly not enough time to really write a note, at least not a decent one. And so they told us, oh, we'll write them in session, but I just can't, when I'm with a client, like I'm 100%, I usually don't even have my computer out. Like I'm totally
Same.
focused
I
Same.
on
don't have
them
mine.
because I can't split my attention. The minute I try to start typing something, I'm no longer listening to them. And then that's not fair to them. So I think that there are great therapists who can multitask in that way. I am just not one of them.
Yeah.
No,
Oh
same.
no, definitely.
Wait, Michelle, did you ever have a client like so when you worked at the clinic, did you ever have a client be like, this is so rude that you're like typing in front of me or saying something like that? I
I
had
used to have
somebody
like
do
a
that.
PSA I would give people. I'd be like, I know that this seems really rude and I'm sorry, but I have to type this. I would usually only do it for the treatment plans because the notes I just gave up. I was like, I'll just do those, at 1 o'clock in the morning or whenever I get around to it. But the treatment plans I would do with them, and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing nowadays too. Like I do the treatment plan with them, but then like I'm like, all right, the notes are a future me problem. But that
Yeah,
is also kind of biting me in the ass too, because then I'm staying up late getting these things done.
yep,
And then it's like, all right, like to do it all over again tomorrow, you know?
yeah. I wish I could say it gets better with time, but like you can ask my husband. There's plenty of times where he's like, I'm going to bed, and I'm like, cool, I'm writing my notes.
Yeah, I look at gaps in my calendar. I'm like trying to write the notes in like the 15-minute intervals that I have. But it
Yeah.
stings because, it's 15 minutes. And then at that I even forget sometimes that I have a lunch break. It's so
Oh
bad.
yeah. I eat while I write notes all the time. I like that's like my baseline at this point.
Michelle, what got you into trauma in the first place?
That's a good question. I kind of fell into it. I was working at that clinic and they had offered for the therapists to have TFCPT training and certification for free. They were like, we have so many people coming in with trauma. Like, if you guys want to train in this. So I signed up and I did it. Um, and I just fell in love with trauma treatment. I kind of realized that for a lot of the clients I have been working with, that once we started to address the trauma, that the other symptoms just dissipated. They just kind of went
Mhm.
away. Not 100%, it's not a solves all, but I feel like when you address the trauma and you really get to the root of that, some of the other things do tend to kind of wash away at least a little bit.
How do you like TSCBT?
I really like it. I've had a lot of great success with it. I love that it involves a parent or caregiver. I think that that's really healing for a lot of kids, especially the ones that come in where they might be telling me something that they have not told their parents yet that's happened to them. Being able to use that and really ease them into it. It's not like okay, we got to bring them in and like, tell them all at once. It's sort of, I'm able to coach the parents on how to respond appropriately and supportively. I don't know. I don't think there's anything about TFCBT that I don't like. I enjoy using it quite a bit.
Yeah, I like the workbook, especially like with little kids. I feel with teenagers
Yeah.
a little bit more difficult because they're just like, I don't want to draw. I don't want to write.
Yeah.
I don't want to color. I'm like, let's try it, you know? And then some teenagers come on and was like, okay, I kind of liked it.
Yeah. I have a lot of that teenagers love writing their narratives and get
Mm,
really into that, especially because I feel like, I don't know if this is for you, but whenever we do it, oftentimes we'll do kind of like a timeline. I'll draw a line and have them kind of make like different major events around their trauma. And then we'll
Hmm.
get into writing it. And then we'll get into the details and we kind of dig deeper and deeper into those details. But they can get really into it. And it's a form of exposure. It definitely is anxiety inducing in a lot of ways. But I think it's also really healing because they're getting to tell their story from their point of view. It's their truth. It doesn't have to be impacted by anyone else or what anyone else thinks. It's 100% from them
oh
and their mouth.
yeah. I love that fact that, they just can sit at the computer and I tell them like take it away. This is all you. Like
Yeah.
I'm here to help you, but in reality it's your story. And a couple of kids they say, I need like an outline. And so I'll say, okay, let's start from the beginning. What do you want your introduction to be? And for instance, one client, she was like, I want it to be all about me, like introducing me. And so I wrote introducing me. And then the next part is like, okay, well, what do you want to write in terms of what happened? And then the middle section will be what happened to me. And then the bottom will be like their goals, their achievements, what they want to do in the future. And then that will be outlined as future me. And they get so into it, and knowing that that fire has not been put out or it's being healed after what happened, it's the greatest feeling ever.
Yeah, I love when people put their personal flair on their narrative. Like I had one client, she was like early teens and she put the font, I don't remember which font it was, but it was like very like, I don't know, whimsical. Like it was a very silly, and I remember I had emailed the narrative to the parents prior to us having our, conjoint meeting all together.
Hmm.
And I was like, by the way, this was not my font choice. This was your daughter. But it was cool. I kind of made things like a little bit more fun and lighthearted than
Yeah.
we had anticipated.
Can I just say that like I trauma is something that I'm not experienced in, but I will try my best to deal with clients who have gone through a traumatic experience. And just hearing you guys and like what you guys do, like I'm taking some mental notes here because it's good to know. It's good to know. So when I've seen trauma clients, I have them write a narrative but in third person,
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
taking them out of their experience and then processing it of like if it's somebody who's like a let's say an adult or teenager, like what would you have told your younger self then? Like what you know now. Things like
Hmm.
that, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But I've never had a client just yet who has told me like, oh, like my parent doesn't know about X, Y, and Z. So to know how you guys handle it is interesting, and I'm definitely gonna take it into future sessions. So I just learned something new today.
I'm glad.
How do you guys build rapport virtually with kids? Like kids are so kids I wait, hold on. So kids are just I I'm not the best with kids. I'm not gonna lie. I do teenagers and I do adults. And I feel like it's just a lot easier for me to be able to talk with teens and to talk to adults, whereas with kids, like I have a hard time getting them engaged. And I know it's a lot of it is a lot of like playing, but virtually, how do you both get them engaged? Because I have a hard time. I truly do. Please tell me any tips.
It's
It's
hard.
really hard. I was very, very, very lucky when I wasn't fully licensed yet. One of my supervisors was a registered play therapist, and it was during the time of COVID when everything had to be virtual. And I was seeing a bunch of kids, and she ran this group for a bunch of us therapists on how to engage kids via a virtual platform. So I have a virtual play therapy room. It's just a Google Slides thing, and there's like the movie theater room where we watch videos. There's like the book reading room where we read books together. There's the game room where I can play games with them, like chess and different things, sharing my screen or what have you. But overall, it's really hard. I strongly encourage parents, if they can, make it into the office to come into the office. But of course, there are people who live, like 45 an hour out and they can't, and you make it work.
Yeah. With me, it's all about making the sessions fun
Yeah.
and just to keep their attention because like just like adults, kids don't want to be there. Majority of the time kids don't even know why they're there. They're just there. They just know mom and dad brought me.
Yeah.
Something happened to me and mom and dad brought me, but I don't really want to talk about it. So I
Right.
think the main thing is just keeping them entertained to the point that they will talk when they're ready to, just making them feel safe, like they have a safe haven, a safe environment, and giving them time. That's my best advice.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Now, Michelle, we usually end by asking, where's your mental health at today on a scale of 1 to 10? Um,
Ooh,
10 being like you are at your best.
I would say I'm at probably like a 7.5. I think maybe like almost an 8. Feeling pretty good today. Feel like that's like my baseline these days. But I think what doesn't make it a 10 would be I always have so many things to do. I feel like working like work related or mom related or whatever, like my to-do list is just very long.
I wonder if you put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think as well, I've tried to step away from social media because I find myself I think we all do, kind of comparing. I'll see like a mom on Instagram or TikTok whose like house is spotless and like everything's perfect and their kids eat like raw broccoli and I don't know, grilled chicken. My
Little
kids are very
secret.
picky.
They hire cleaners and cooks.
Right. Like I don't have a cleaning person. Um, So I have to remind myself like that is not reality. And like our parents didn't, they were only maybe comparing themselves to the woman next door or the person next door who also was in the same boat. So I have to remind myself like I'm doing just fine. I don't have to have everything just so for it to be great.
Now, as we've we've been through like the ringer when it comes to like grad school and all that, right? So like what advice would you give someone that's trying to get into the field, especially specifically your field, the social work field?
Yeah, I would say don't put too much pressure on yourself. Take it slowly. I think the best thing I did for myself was I left school when I did. I knew I would always eventually go back, but at the time, I remember one of my professors explained to us that graduate school was going to be really, really hard, and that there is kind of our comfort zone, which was where we were before school started. There's the growth zone, which is us. We should probably have a healthy amount of anxiety and stress, but it's okay. We're going to get through it. And then there's what she called the abyss. I distinctly remember sitting in her classroom and thinking, I'm not in the growth zone. Like I'm out there. My ship has sailed. Like I'm in the
Into the
abyss.
abyss.
Yeah, and I got to get out of here. So I just taking it slow. Take care of yourself because you can't fill up anyone else's cup if yours is empty.
Michelle, thank you again. I really appreciated that you took your time out to, especially
Yeah.
with your family, to be able to talk to us and to learn more about you. It really does mean a lot. So
Well,
thank you
I had so
again.
much fun. I appreciate being invited on. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can keep in touch after this too, because you're amazing. I love what you do and I really respect
Thank
you,
you.
especially as somebody who's a mom and then a therapist and juggling all that together. It's a lot.
Caffeine.
Caffeine,
Lots
that's
of
a secret.
coffee. Yeah. All
All right,
right. I hope you
everybody.
guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Please like, share, subscribe, share this with your friends and family. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, therapists_unmasked, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.